Black billionaire denied service at his own jewelry store. 7 minutes later, he fires the manager. "Sir, I'm going to have to ask you to leave." The words sliced through the quiet hum of polished elegance inside Whitestone Combe, an upscale jewelry boutique nestled in the heart of Beverly Hills. The voice was sharp, cold, and loaded with something more than just protocol. Cameron West, a tall black man dressed in a casual dark cashmere hoodie and crisp jeans, looked up slowly from the glass case where he'd been admiring a vintage platinum timepiece. "I'm sorry, what?" Cameron asked calmly, his brow furrowing as he turned to face the manager, a tightly wound man in his late 40s with slicked-back blonde hair and a name tag that read, Gerald Hensley, store director. "You heard me," Gerald replied, crossing his arms. "We don't allow loitering." "We're a high-end establishment, not a showroom for browsers." The store had only a handful of clients, all of whom had turned to watch. An older couple pretended not to stare, their eyes still locked on the scene over their designer sunglasses. A young sales associate shifted uncomfortably nearby, clearly sensing something wasn't right, but too junior to intervene. Cameron let out a breath and glanced once more at the watch. Then he met Gerald's gaze squarely. "You assume I'm loitering because I'm dressed casually?" he asked, his voice steady. Gerald smirked. "No. I assume you're loitering because I've been doing this for 20 years, and I know who's here to shop and who's here to cause problems. So unless you're about to spend $100,000, I'd suggest you take your window shopping elsewhere." Cameron blinked slowly, as if trying to absorb the absurdity of the moment. Then he reached into his back pocket and pulled out a sleek leather wallet. From it, he removed a black Amex card, the kind that doesn't have a spending limit. He held it out calmly. "Will this do?" Gerald didn't even glance at the card. That could be fake for all I know. "And frankly, this isn't a place where you get to test limits. It's reserved for our VIPs. A heavy silence settled. The audacity in Gerald's tone stunned even the other customers. Just then, the boutique's doors opened, and a sharply dressed woman in a tailored pantsuit entered. Her heels clicked assertively against the marble floor. She froze for a split second when she saw Cameron standing face to face with Gerald. "Mr. West?" she said, rushing forward. "I didn't expect you to come in person." Cameron gave her a brief nod. "I wanted to see for myself." Gerald's face twitched. "Wait, Mr. West?" The woman turned to Gerald with disbelief. "Gerald, are you out of your mind? This is Cameron West, the owner. He bought Whitestone Co. 2 months ago." All color drained from Gerald's face. Cameron finally pocketed his card and folded his arms. "I came in unannounced to see how customers are treated." "Clearly I don't need to dig much further." The woman, Sierra Bellamy, the newly appointed operations director, looked devastated. "I'm so sorry, sir. I didn't know." Cameron shook his head. "You're not the one who owes me an apology." Gerald's lips parted, but words wouldn't come. He looked like a man whose entire world was cracking open. "Gerald?" Cameron said, his voice low but powerful. "You're fired, effective immediately." A hush fell over the boutique. "But sir," Gerald stammered. "This is a misunderstanding. You can't just—" "I just did," Cameron said, then turned to Sierra. "Have security escort him out." "And have legal draw up the paperwork today." Sierra nodded. Gerald stood frozen, as if waiting for someone to say this was all a joke, but no one did. Security, summoned from the back, approached quietly but firmly. As Gerald was walked out, Cameron took a long look around the store. The same people who had silently judged him now avoided his gaze, suddenly realizing how wrong they'd been. He approached the young associate, who had stood awkwardly by during the whole exchange. "What's your name?" he asked. "Marcus," the young man said nervously. "Marcus Fields. You were the only one who didn't treat me like I didn't belong, Cameron said. You'll be promoted to senior sales, effective immediately. And Sierra, give him a raise. Marcus's eyes widened in disbelief. Thank you, sir. I just treated you the way I'd want to be treated. Cameron smiled faintly. Exactly. He turned back to Sierra. Let's meet tomorrow. We need to review all customer service protocols, top to bottom. I'm not running a luxury brand that tolerates arrogance. Sierra nodded firmly. Yes, sir. We'll make it right. Cameron gave one last look at the display case with the vintage watch. Then he turned and walked out of his own store, leaving behind a silence filled with awe, regret, and a whole lot of reflection. Outside, sunlight spilled across Rodeo Drive. A sleek black Rolls-Royce waited at the curb. Cameron slid into the back seat, pulled out his phone, and began typing a message. Not to boast, not to gloat, but to make sure this never happened again. To anyone. Later that evening, Cameron sat alone in his downtown Los Angeles penthouse. The skyline flickered beyond the floor-to-ceiling windows, but his eyes weren't on the view. His fingers hovered above his phone, scrolling through hundreds of messages that had poured in within hours. The store incident had gone viral. A customer had secretly filmed the confrontation inside Whitestone Cone, capturing the exact moment Gerald dismissed Cameron and the twist that followed. The clip was posted anonymously, but now every major platform was buzzing. Headlines read, "Black billionaire denied service in his own store," and "Cameron West fires manager on the spot." The comments were explosive. Some applauded Cameron's calm composure and swift action. Others shared their own stories of being racially profiled in luxury stores. A few skeptics questioned if it was staged or if Cameron should have revealed his identity sooner. Cameron locked his phone and exhaled deeply. Then, almost on instinct, he walked over to a sleek glass cabinet in the corner of the room and opened it. Inside were framed photos. His mother, young and radiant, working double shifts as a cleaner. His late father in military uniform, and a much younger Cameron, wearing hand-me-downs, standing in front of the same jewelry store when it was under different ownership. This wasn't just about being denied service. It was about being told, again, that he didn't belong. He grabbed a glass of bourbon and sat down on the edge of the sofa. A soft knock interrupted his thoughts. Moments later, Sierra Bellamy stepped in, holding a folder and wearing a look that blended urgency and shame. "I came straight from the store," she said, placing the folder on the coffee table. "It's everything on Gerald? Employee files, past complaints, performance records? And honestly, it's worse than we thought." Cameron raised an eyebrow. "How so?" Sierra flipped open the folder. There were at least 3 internal complaints from black customers, 2 of them from just last month. One woman was told she needed an appointment to try on engagement rings, but 5 minutes later, a white couple walked in without an appointment and were given champagne. Cameron's jaw tightened. "Why didn't anyone escalate these?" he asked. Sierra looked down, guilt clouding her eyes. The culture under Gerald was intimidating. He shut people down. Told the sales team not to waste time on browsers. He covered it up well. Until today. Cameron leaned back, swirling the bourbon in his glass. I walked in hoping to observe how we treat everyday customers. I didn't expect to become the test case. Sierra hesitated. There's something else. The person who leaked the video. It was Marcus, the junior associate. What? Cameron sat up straighter. He recorded it? He didn't post it maliciously, Sierra said quickly. He sent it to a friend who works in non-profit racial justice. That person posted it. He's terrified he'll be fired. Cameron thought for a moment. He's the reason we know what the world thinks. I'm not mad. In fact, I want to meet with him tomorrow. Sierra nodded. Understood. The room went quiet for a moment before she spoke again, softer this time. Cameron, I need to ask, why didn't you reveal who you were when Gerald was pushing you out? He looked up at her, eyes steady. Because I wanted to see how deep the rot went. I've spent my whole life building something that looks polished on the outside. But if it's built on bias and fear, it's no better than the system that shut my parents out their entire lives. Sierra nodded slowly, visibly moved. You planning to make a public statement? Yes, he said. But not yet. First, I want to clean house, internally. Then I'll speak. That night, as Cameron stared out over the city again, his mind wasn't on the headlines, or the video views, or even the fallout. He was thinking about Marcus. He was thinking about that woman turned away from an engagement ring. He was thinking about every young kid walking into a store and wondering if they had to look rich just to be seen. The next morning, Cameron arrived early at the store, this time with no cameras, no entourage, and no Armani suit. Just him. And a plan. The morning air was crisp as Cameron stepped out of his black Escalade, this time wearing a simple charcoal hoodie, jeans and sneakers. No security, no assistant, no tailored suit. Just him. He wanted to see the reaction when he wasn't in billionaire armor, just a black man walking into a luxury store that bore his name. Whitestone Company hadn't opened to the public yet. Inside, the staff buzzed with quiet tension. Gerald's sudden termination had left a void, and whispers of the viral video still circled like wildfire. As Cameron pushed open the door, a hush fell across the sales floor. Every head turned. Marcus, the young associate who had captured the incident, looked up from the display he was straightening and froze. His face flushed with panic. He quickly walked over, wringing his hands. Mr. West, I didn't mean... Cameron held up a hand. Relax. You did the right thing, he said evenly. If anything, you helped uncover the real culture in this place. Marcus blinked. You're not mad? Cameron leaned in slightly. I'm grateful, but let's not waste that moment. Come with me. He led Marcus to the back office where Sierra was waiting. Cameron shut the door behind them and turned to the nervous young man. I need the truth, Cameron said. Everything you've seen. Not just about Gerald, but the whole operation. What's going on here? Marcus hesitated, then took a breath. It's not just Gerald. There's this hierarchy, unspoken rules. Black customers get watched more. Latino families are treated like they can't afford anything. And if you speak up, you're labeled a troublemaker. Sierra clenched her jaw. We never saw any of this in the reports. Because no one reported it, Marcus replied. They knew it wouldn't go anywhere. HR answers to the store manager. Cameron nodded slowly, absorbing it all. Not anymore. That afternoon, he called an emergency staff meeting. The store hadn't opened yet, but every employee was required to attend. They gathered in the lounge, uncertain and restless. Cameron stood at the front, Sierra beside him, her arms folded, her face unreadable. I'm going to be blunt, Cameron began. What happened to me in this store is just the surface. What's underneath is worse. He scanned the room. Bias, discrimination. A toxic culture that rewards appearance over character. Some staff looked down, others shifted uncomfortably. I'm not here to give a speech. I'm here to tell you things are changing, immediately. He paused, letting the silence settle. Effective today, I'm launching an internal audit. Every complaint, every customer interaction, every hiring decision, reviewed. You'll be given a chance to speak anonymously, and I want to hear it all. Someone at the back raised a hand. It was Carla, a Latina employee who'd worked quietly behind the scenes for years. "I got passed over for assistant manager 3 times, she said, voice trembling but firm. "Even when I trained the new hires, I stopped trying." Cameron looked her in the eye. "Noted. That ends today." Then, just as he was about to dismiss the meeting, another voice spoke up from the side of the room. "I think you need to know something else." It was Byron, an older white employee who had been with the store since before Cameron's acquisition. His reputation was clean, quiet, until now. "I overheard Gerald talking once," Byron continued. "He knew who you were that day. He recognized your face. He just didn't care." Cameron narrowed his gaze. "Are you saying he denied me service on purpose?" Byron nodded slowly. He said, "Even billionaires need to be put in their place sometimes." Then he laughed. A chill settled over the room. Sierra looked stunned. Cameron's lips pressed into a tight line, and for a moment he didn't speak. Then, coldly, he said, "Thank you, Byron. That confirms what I suspected." He turned to Sierra. "Contact legal. We're not done with Gerald yet." Later that night, Sierra joined Cameron at his home again. They sat in the kitchen, wine glasses untouched. "I can't believe he knew," she whispered. "He wanted to humiliate you." Cameron shook his head slowly. "This isn't just about ego, Sierra. This is about a system where someone like Gerald thought he could get away with that, even knowing exactly who I was." She looked at him. "So what's next?" Cameron stared ahead. "We rebuild. But not just here. I'm opening a scholarship for students studying business ethics. I'm funding minority-led startups in luxury retail." "We flip the script." Sierra smiled faintly. "You're making it bigger than revenge." Cameron met her gaze. "Because this was never about revenge. It's about accountability." But even as he spoke those words, he knew the storm wasn't over. Because somewhere, Gerald was preparing his own counterattack. And Cameron was ready. The air inside Gerald's apartment was thick with frustration and scotch. He sat slouched on his leather couch, watching the news loop the same story over and over. Cameron West being denied service, the viral video, the firing, and now, the internal audit. His phone buzzed with texts from old friends, business acquaintances, and a few opportunists pretending to care. But one message stood out. "They want to bury you. Let's talk." No name. Just a number Gerald hadn't seen in years. He stared at it, then smirked. Maybe all wasn't lost. Back at Whitestone Cone, the fallout from the staff meeting had begun to ripple. Cameron and Sierra reviewed stacks of employee reports daily. Stories of microaggressions, missed promotions, and dismissed customer complaints painted a damning picture. And the more they read, the more it was clear. Gerald wasn't the only problem. He was just the most visible one. "Look at this," Sierra said, handing Cameron a report from the store's former security chief. "Apparently, Gerald once instructed guards to subtly monitor customers who wore urban brands." Cameron's jaw tensed. "So we're profiling people based on clothes now?" Sierra's voice was low. He called it protecting the brand image. Cameron stood up, pacing. "We built this brand to be inclusive. Accessible, without losing elegance. How did it become this gatekeeping playground?" Sierra looked at him. "Because people like Gerald think elegance belongs to them." He stopped pacing. Not anymore. Later that afternoon, Sierra received a legal alert. Gerald had filed a wrongful termination suit, publicly. And in the filing, he claimed Cameron's visit was a setup, that he was tricked into mistreating a disguised billionaire for publicity. Worse, A gossip site picked up the filing and ran the headline, "Billionaire Cameron West staged discrimination for attention." The backlash was swift and divisive. Online debates exploded. Was it real? Was it a publicity stunt? Was Cameron weaponizing race? Inside his office, Cameron threw the tabloid down on the desk. "They're flipping the narrative." Sierra's expression was stone cold. "We need to respond." But Cameron shook his head. "Not yet. Let them underestimate me." That night, he made a quiet call to someone from his past, Elijah Monroe, an investigative journalist he'd worked with during his earliest philanthropic campaigns. "I need a deep dive," Cameron said. "Gerald Preston. Everything. Past employers, complaints, lawsuits. Anything that didn't stick but should have." Elijah didn't hesitate. "You're not going to like what I find, are you?" "I hope I don't." 2 days later, Elijah showed up with a flash drive and a grim look. Gerald used to manage another upscale store in Dallas. A black couple filed a lawsuit against him after being accused of shoplifting, wrongfully. The footage proved they hadn't stolen anything. Case settled quietly. Store absorbed the cost. Cameron leaned forward. And he left 2 months later. Quiet resignation, no formal firing. Sierra looked sick. "They protected him." "Or protected themselves," Elijah said. "But there's more. A former employee from that Dallas store is willing to talk. She claims Gerald had a running list of undesirable clients, mostly minorities. Wants to stay anonymous, but she's ready to testify if needed." Cameron sat back, his face unreadable. "This isn't just about me," he murmured. "This is about how many people like me were made to feel small by people like him." Sierra placed a hand on his arm. "Then let's make sure the next person never has to." At the same time, Gerald was building his own campaign. A sympathetic podcast host invited him to share his side of the story. He sat there in a pressed blazer, polished and persuasive. "It was a misunderstanding," he told the host. "I treated him like any walk-in customer. I didn't recognize him. How could I have known?" "And if you had?" the host asked. Gerald smiled tightly. "I would have offered him the best service, of course. I've worked with high-profile clients before." "I respect everyone. But that day, it felt like a trap." The host nodded, feeding him softballs. "Some are saying this is reverse discrimination, that white employees are now being penalized too harshly for one mistake." Gerald leaned into the mic. "That's exactly what it feels like." The clip went viral. Comment sections lit up with debates. "He's playing the victim," Sierra said, watching it in disbelief. Cameron didn't blink. "Let him. His mask is cracking." 3 hours later, Marcus sent them something. "Found this on an old internal drive." "It's from a month ago," he texted. It was footage from the security room. Gerald, talking to another manager. "You see that kid in the hoodie?" Gerald sneered on the recording. "Watch him. Probably here to steal. If he gets mouthy, call security. We don't play games with their kind." Their kind. Cameron played it again. Then again. Until it didn't sting anymore. It just solidified his resolve. "This is it," he said. "We go public." Sierra looked at him. "You sure?" Cameron nodded. "Not just to clear my name. To expose the system that built him." What Gerald didn't know, what the world didn't know yet, was that Cameron wasn't just fighting for himself anymore. He was about to shine a spotlight no one could turn off. The lights dimmed inside the grand ballroom of the West Foundation's annual gala, a charity event known for its elegance and influence. Cameron stood backstage, straightening his black tuxedo in the mirror, but his mind wasn't on the donors or the press waiting outside. His phone buzzed again, Another message from his PR team urging him not to mention Gerald or the lawsuit tonight. Keep it clean, they advised. Focus on charity. He slipped the phone into his pocket. Not tonight. The ballroom was filled with the city's elite. Politicians, business leaders, celebrities. Sierra moved gracefully through the crowd, checking last-minute details, making sure the evening's silent auction and donation pledges went smoothly. Everything looked perfect on the outside, but behind the scenes pressure was mounting. Gerald's media tour had worked. Cable networks picked up the story. A few opinion hosts questioned if Cameron had weaponized his wealth to humiliate a white employee. Social media was ablaze with edited clips and conspiracy theories. Your silence is costing us support, Sierra had warned earlier. Some donors are pulling back. They don't like controversy. Cameron's jaw had clenched. Then they were never here for the mission. Now, as he walked on stage to applause, the screens behind him lit up with images of past scholarship recipients and funded community projects. He gave the crowd a practiced smile. Good evening, he began. Thank you for standing with us another year. Tonight is about opportunity, about justice. And about dignity. He paused, scanning the room. The air shifted. Which is why I won't ignore the headlines anymore. A quiet murmur rippled through the audience. I was denied service in my own store, not because of who I am, but because someone didn't know who I was. And that's exactly the problem. You shouldn't have to be a billionaire to be treated with basic respect. Sierra, watching from the wings, held her breath. Cameron continued, This isn't just about me. It's about the everyday people who face that same dismissal without a camera, without a platform, without the luxury of fighting back. People who walk into rooms and are treated like they don't belong. He gestured toward the screen as it flashed a new image. A young black girl in a classroom, her hands covered in clay, working on a sculpture. That's Amira. One of the kids we supported last year. You think she doesn't belong in an art studio? You think her future should be determined by what she wears or the shade of her skin? A round of applause broke out. Louder than expected. People were leaning forward now. So tonight, I'm not just donating another $1 million to youth programs. I'm launching a new initiative, one that will monitor and report discrimination in high-end retail environments, because no more should anyone have to be rich to be respected. The room erupted. People stood. Some clapped. Others looked stunned. Phones came out. The clip would go viral before he even stepped off stage. Backstage, Sierra grabbed his arm. You just declared war on half your donor base. Cameron didn't flinch. Then I'll find new allies. But the real surprise came the next morning. A former Whitestone executive, Linda Park, released a public statement backing Cameron. In it, she revealed that she had resigned 2 years prior due to a culture of elitist bias, perpetuated by Gerald and a few others in upper management. She shared emails, memos, meeting notes. Some showed Gerald referring to certain clientele as riffraff and low-class glamour wannabes. One email even referred to a potential partnership with a black-owned luxury brand as too urban for our brand image. By noon, hat expose. Whitestone was trending nationwide. Sierra stared at the screen, stunned. This just cracked wide open. Cameron was quiet. He played the media game, but he underestimated how deep this rot goes. They called an emergency press conference that afternoon. This time, it wasn't just Cameron at the podium. Behind him stood Elijah, Sierra, Linda, and 3 former employees who had experienced similar treatment. My name is Cameron Lewis, one of them said, her voice trembling but firm. I was a floor manager at Whitestone for 3 years. I loved my job, until I realized I was being used as a token. I was never going to get promoted. Gerald told me once I fit the look, but didn't have the pedigree. Another stepped up. I got let go for poor sales, but the real reason was I refused to follow his silent policy of shadowing certain customers. Cameron let them speak, uninterrupted. He knew their voices were more powerful than any billionaire's outrage. That night, Gerald appeared on national news for a live interview. Flustered, he dismissed the claims as sour grapes and strategic character assassination. The host wasn't buying it. "If these are all lies, Mr. Preston," she asked, "why are there so many people telling the same story?" His eyes darted. "It's a coordinated effort." "They're trying to ruin me." "Or maybe," she said slowly, "you did that yourself." The interview ended in silence. Back at home, Cameron sat in the dark, watching the clip on repeat. His phone buzzed with messages of support, others of caution. He leaned back, eyes closed. They weren't done yet. And Gerald still didn't know what was coming next. The storm hit faster than anyone expected. By the end of the week, Whitestone's stock price had dropped nearly 10%. Public backlash wasn't slowing down. On the contrary, it was multiplying. Clips from Cameron's speech were stitched into TikToks, spliced with testimonies from former employees and customers who had experienced similar discrimination at the luxury chain. #Whitestone. While Black began trending across all platforms, inside the company's Manhattan headquarters, panic was setting in. Gerald sat in the executive conference room, eyes hollow, listening to a rapid-fire legal update. "Our internal investigation can't hold off the press anymore," one attorney said. "We have 3 more former employees ready to go public." One of them claims Gerald used racial slurs in a training session back in 2019. Gerald shot up from his chair. "This is a hit job. They're making things up to bring me down." Another executive leaned forward, visibly uncomfortable. "Then why are all the stories consistent? You called Cameron a security threat. You accused him of faking his identity." "We can't spin that anymore." Gerald turned to the company's CEO, Richard Van Holt, an old-school corporate figure who cared more about image than truth. "You can't let them hang me out to dry," Gerald snapped. "I built this brand's reputation." Van Holt didn't flinch. "Which is exactly why you're becoming a liability." Later that day, Gerald received a notice. He was being placed on administrative leave pending investigation. He stared at the paper in disbelief, then crumpled it in his fist. Across town, Cameron sat at the edge of a conference table in a studio loft, meeting with his legal team and 2 documentary producers. Sierra stood beside him, scrolling through emails from major networks and streaming platforms, all now vying for the rights to tell his story. "You sure you want to go forward with this docu-series?" she asked quietly. Cameron nodded. "It's not just about my store anymore. It's about exposing how deep this problem runs in luxury culture, in retail, in how America sees black wealth." Sierra gave him a look. "You're playing with fire." "I'm done asking permission to be seen," he said. The producers pitched a bold idea. The first episode would open with Cameron walking into Whitestone wearing the exact same outfit from the day of the incident. Grey hoodie, black jeans, scuffed boots. He would narrate over surveillance footage, telling the audience what was running through his mind when Gerald dismissed him. A reenactment would follow, powerful, accurate, uncomfortable. Cameron leaned forward. "I want viewers to feel what I felt. Not just watch it, feel it." They set the shoot date for next week. Meanwhile, Gerald, desperate to salvage his reputation, hired a high-profile crisis PR firm. They released a tone-deaf statement full of corporate jargon about misunderstandings and committed reflection. But then came the final blow. A video surfaced. Grainy but clear enough. A cell phone recording from 2 years prior, Gerald standing in a training seminar, chuckling as he mimicked how to spot potential thieves. His impression was racially coded, exaggerated, unmistakably offensive. The room had gone silent at the time. But now, that silence had become deafening. The video exploded online. Whitestone's board convened an emergency meeting. Within hours, Gerald was terminated effective immediately, with no severance. Cameron was at his downtown office when he got the news. Sierra burst through the door, waving her phone. "He's done. They fired him." Cameron exhaled slowly. "Good." But Sierra looked unsettled. "There's something else." She handed him the phone. A message had come in from an anonymous sender. It was a scanned email. Internal Whitestone correspondence. In it, a marketing executive mentioned an unspoken directive from upper management to subtly redirect resources away from partnerships that don't align with traditional clientele expectations. In other words, cut ties with black-owned jewelers and community charities. Cameron read the line 3 times. "They weren't just racist on the floor," he murmured. "They built it into the foundation." The next morning, he called an urgent press conference. This time, he brought receipts, documents, emails, first-hand statements. He exposed the company's culture for what it was: polished discrimination, masked as brand identity. "I was lucky," he told the crowd. "I had a name, a platform, and resources to fight back." But what about the people who don't? What about the single mom who gets followed around a store? What about the teenager who's told they're in the wrong place? The media took notice. Politicians weighed in. Advocacy groups rallied behind him. But as the applause faded, Cameron's expression turned solemn. "This was never just about one manager. It's about a system. And systems don't change just because one man got fired. They change when we demand it, over and over again." He stepped off the podium and into the crowd, shaking hands with former employees, activists and supporters who had flown in from across the country. That night, as he walked home alone through the city, he passed by his jewelry store. The lights were on. The windows gleamed. A young black couple stood outside, peering in, hesitating. Cameron paused. He walked up, smiled, and opened the door for them. "You're welcome here," he said. "Always." Then he disappeared into the back room, not as a billionaire, but as a man reclaiming something deeper than wealth. Dignity. The camera crews had barely packed up when the backlash turned into something else. Momentum. Cameron's exposé had done more than take down Gerald. It cracked open a culture of silent compliance, not just inside Whitestone, but across the entire luxury industry. Former employees from other brands came forward. Whistleblowers emailed Cameron's team anonymously, providing proof of racial profiling policies hidden beneath layers of vague corporate language. A movement was forming, and for once, it had a face. But not everyone was happy about it. That evening, Cameron received an unexpected visit from Richard Van Holt himself, the CEO of Whitestone. He arrived at the private rooftop office of Cameron's new foundation headquarters, unannounced, and wearing a carefully calculated expression, somewhere between concern and desperation. "I wanted to speak man to man," Richard began, as Cameron waved him into the conference room. Cameron didn't offer him a seat. "I don't do private deals behind closed doors," he said flatly. "This isn't about a deal," Richard replied. "It's about survival. For the company, for the hundreds of employees who had nothing to do with what happened. You've made your point, loud and clear. Gerald's gone. Policy is changing. But if Whitestone collapses completely, who wins?" Cameron folded his arms. "You came here to guilt-trip me?" Richard leaned in slightly. "I came here to offer something else. A partnership. Public. Transparent. We bring you on as a diversity consultant, someone who helps reshape the company from the inside. You'll have full oversight, Real power. Cameron blinked. It wasn't what he'd expected. You're scared the brand won't survive this unless I bless it with my name. Richard didn't deny it. We both know how the world works. There was a long silence. Sierra, standing in the doorway, gave Cameron a look, sharp, questioning. I'll think about it, Cameron said finally. When Richard left, Sierra turned to him, arms crossed. You're not seriously considering it, are you? I'm considering what the impact could be, Cameron said. Real reform. Real change. But at what cost? She asked. You spent years building something that stood outside their system. You want to walk back into it now? He didn't answer. That night, Cameron couldn't sleep. He walked through the halls of his downtown building, past sketches of his new jewelry line, past photos from the community programs he'd quietly funded for years. Then he entered the storage vault, a quiet, temperature-controlled room where his most prized pieces were kept. He opened one drawer. Inside sat a custom pendant he'd designed when he first opened his flagship store, a piece shaped like an open hand, holding a stone carved with the words, "Truth in Fire." He picked it up and stared at it, remembering why he started this in the first place. The next morning, Cameron held a press conference. He began calmly. Yesterday, I was offered a position by Whitestone to help fix their image. They wanted to partner with me, publicly, visibly, because they need my story to clean up theirs. A murmur rippled through the crowd. I thought about it. Because real reform sounds good. Because I want to believe people can change. But then I realized, this isn't about me. It's about who's not in this room. He paused, locking eyes with the cameras. The Whitestones of the world don't need another face to cover their cracks. They need fire to melt the whole foundation. He held up the pendant. I built my own house with my own hands. And I won't sell that for access to theirs. Thunderous applause broke out. The speech went viral instantly. Again. But behind the scenes, Sierra approached him with something else, something urgent. Take a look at this. It was an internal memo leaked from one of Whitestone's competitors. The document listed high-value clients, coded by ethnicity, with notes suggesting which ones were brand compatible. Cameron stared at it, his blood running cold. This isn't just a Whitestone problem. No, Sierra said. This is an industry problem. A new question formed in his mind. Not how to punish one company, but how to expose an entire system. He sat down, slowly, as the next move crystallized in his head. He would build not just a movement, but a platform. Something that would outlive the news cycle. Something that would change the rules. And as the sun began to rise outside, painting the skyline gold, Cameron knew this was no longer about a jewelry store. It was a war for dignity, for equity, for justice carved into stone. The media frenzy refused to die down. By the end of the week, Cameron Black's name was everywhere, from late-night talk shows to financial segments dissecting what they now called the Whitestone Reckoning. But while the public was still processing his refusal to partner with Whitestone, Cameron had already moved on to something bigger. He had quietly assembled a team of legal analysts, civil rights advocates, and tech developers. The goal? To launch Mirror, a real-time, publicly accessible watchdog platform that tracked racial bias patterns in luxury retail, using anonymized customer reviews, whistleblower tips, and AI data scanning purchase behavior. Within 48 hours of the platform's soft launch, submissions poured in. Stories from across the country flooded the servers. A Latina mother humiliated in a Beverly Hills boutique. An Asian entrepreneur followed in a Miami mall. A black teenager falsely accused of shoplifting a Rolex he had saved for a year to buy. Cameron didn't sleep. He read every submission like a confession. One afternoon, while reviewing the latest batch of reports, he came across a message flagged as urgent. The sender was Olivia Reyes, a former mid-level corporate employee at one of Whitestone's rival brands, Vittore Cara. Her message was short but chilling. There's a blacklist, internal, coded. Clients ranked not by wealth, but by background. And I can prove it. Cameron scheduled a meeting within the hour. When Olivia showed up, her hands trembled, but her voice was steady.
I knew it was wrong. I kept telling myself I was just following orders, but after what you did, I couldn't look at myself in the mirror anymore.
She handed over a USB. The files contained spreadsheets with names, transactions, and an innocuous-looking column labeled Market Alignment. Next to certain clients, many of them wealthy and influential, was a quiet low. The pattern was unmistakable. Cameron stared at the screen. It wasn't just racial profiling. It was systemic exclusion, baked into algorithms and sales strategies.
This changes everything,
Sierra said, pacing behind him. No, Cameron replied. This confirms everything. He made a call to Maya Tran, the editor-in-chief of The Ledger, a nationally respected investigative outlet. Within 72 hours, the story broke. It was headline news, dominating social feeds and sparking protests outside luxury stores in major cities. Consumers demanded accountability, politicians took note, hearings were scheduled. But the most unexpected response came from inside the industry itself. A group of junior designers and retail staff, many of them people of color, began organizing. They used the Mirror platform to form a coalition, calling for diversity audits, internal training overhauls, and leadership changes. They weren't just speaking out, they were demanding a seat at the table. Cameron was invited to speak at a live-streamed industry summit meant to address the backlash. CEOs, executives, investors. They all showed up, some out of guilt, some out of fear. He walked onto the stage in a simple black suit. No jewelry. No fanfare. I'm not here to burn every brand to the ground, he began. I'm here to make sure the foundations you've built don't keep burying us. He paused, letting the silence land heavy. You've built a world where prestige means exclusion, where worth is measured not just by money but by skin, accent, zip code. That ends now. You want our loyalty, our stories, our dollars. Then earn them, with transparency, with fairness, with action. He didn't shout. He didn't need to. The room was already listening. After the summit, Cameron returned to his flagship store, not as an undercover boss, not as a viral name, but as the man who had redefined what power in retail could look like. As he stepped inside, he noticed something new. A young employee at the front, greeting an elderly black couple with warmth, walking them through the showroom with pride. Cameron smiled. Sierra walked up behind him, nudging his arm. You ready for what's next? I was born ready, he said. Outside, a group of high school students posed in front of the store's new mural, commissioned by Cameron himself, featuring the words, "You belong here." And maybe, for the first time, they truly did. Final message. Sometimes, the systems meant to define us only reveal how powerful we truly are when we refuse to play by their rules. Cameron Black didn't just fight back, he changed the game. If this story inspired you, show your support by liking, sharing, and subscribing to our channel. Every voice matters, and together we make justice visible. Let your story be the next spark.